What are some psychology experiments with interesting results? White rats and black rats were raised separately without seeing each other. When a black rat was placed in the white rat's cage, the other rats ostracized him. When white and black rats are raised together, and a new black rat is placed in a cage, the white rats accept him. So basically rats are racist, unless raised to accept differences. I'm late but nobody has said it yet. The self-fulfilling prophecy studies are very important to social psychology and their findings have many real-world applications. Basically they brought together a group of kids and formed a class with a real teacher. They gave the kids a test for overall academic skill at the start of the course, but didn't really use the scores. Instead they told the teachers that a few students, picked at random, were very brilliant and scores very highly. They then observed the class for a long period of time and noticed that the teachers gave the kids they thought were brilliant much more attention. At the end of the study the kids took the test again and they found that the kids who were randomly named brilliant at the start actually scores higher than the rest of the class. The kids, again, at the start didn't score any different from the rest of the class, but through the self-fulfilling prophecy they became the best in their class. This obviously has tons of application in the world and especially education. The monster experiment. Although it is horrible how they left the children with mental health issues at the end, this experiment gave very good insight to how to parent a child. On this experiment, they took groups of orphan children and separated them into 3 groups. One was the control, the second were told they has a lips and were doing bad, and the third was told that their speech was perfect. As the experiment went on, group 2 began developing lisps after being berated constantly. They became shy and reserved. They were scared to speak because they didn't want to get in trouble because of their poor speaking skills. Group 3, however, had the opposite happen. They talked better, they were more willing to improve. They were encouraged to keep speaking and told that their speech was amazing and perfect. By the end of the experiment, they had one group with no change, one group with now mentally ill children with a speech impediment, and one group with great speaking skills. It truly shows that encouraging children is the way to go, and that verbal abuse can be just as, if not more, harmful as physical abuse. Not entirely sure it fits into the category, but the Rosenhan Experiment. 13 people feigned mental illnesses to get into mental hospitals and all were admitted with different diagnoses. They then assumed their normal personalities, but to be released they all had to admit that they were mentally ill. There was a second part where a hospital challenged Rosenhan to send multiple fake patients to the hospital and they would rate their patients on a scale of whether they think they were faking. They identified many possible fakers, but Rosenhan in fact hadn't sent anyone. The Monopoly Study by Piff. He basically brought 2 strangers into the lab together and had them play a game of Monopoly together. He randomly assigned one participant to start the game with twice as much money than the other, and that participant also got to roll both dice to get around the board. That is, the other participant started with half the money and could only roll 1 dice. At the end of the game, when he asked the participants who started with more money why he won the game, they would chalk it up to their excellent strategy and gamesmanship, rather than the fact that they had started the game with way more resources. It says a lot about how we deal with being born into a privileged state. The 3 Christs of Ipsilanti. Psychologist forces 3 people who believe that they are Jesus Christ to live together. It does not go well. The psychologist, Milton Rokeach, had heard of a case where 2 women who believed that they were Mary, Mother of Christ, were forced to live together, and one of them broke free from their delusion. So he figured, 3 Christs, what would happen? They were angry at each other, often had physical fights. They eventually started getting along by avoiding the topic. He would ask them about the others, and each would say that the others were crazy, that they, of course, were the real Jesus. No cures, some unethical stuff. Interesting though. I'm a huge fan of Milgram's small world experiment. It is more sociology than psychology, but I still think it is really cool. Milgram sends out 160 letters containing the name and address of a stockbroker in Boston to people in Omaha, Nebraska. They had to send it to someone they thought would get the letter closer, but they couldn't mail it directly to the stockbroker. Interestingly, most people that sent on the letter sent it onto the same group of people on the 5th degree. It only took 6 people, hence the 6 degrees of separation, to arrive, on average. It shows how interconnected our world is, even before the internet, which is happy to think about. If you stare into a dimly lit, that is candlelit, mirror for 10+ minutes you start to see hallucinations. What individuals see tends to vary, but they've used this as a test to simulate schizophrenia before, because some see monsters/deformities/general weird shit. I did a variation of it for a mate at uni and completely wimped out of it. After my face started not looking like my face anymore, I had a complete dissociation. I stopped looking and just waited out the time. Edit. I can't find the exact study as I don't have journal access anymore, but here's a decent summary of it in layman's terms. Edit 2. This is a weird visual trick that your brain can play on you, but the effects can seem super real, so maybe don't do this if you are susceptible to hallucinations/are a wimp with this kinda shit like me. Edit 3. Thanks for the gold. And yes, it is basically a scientific Bloody Mary. I loved learning about infant development. My favorite was probably the development of depth perception, or perhaps the fear of heights. We are not born with it, but, if I recall correctly, we develop it within the first year or so. Scientists created a raised square platform. Half of the floor was wood and the other glass. The actual surface of the floor, 1 meter or so below, was white with red polka dots. At varying intervals of age, the babies would be brought in and placed on the wood end and encouraged to crawl to their moms, who were standing at the glass end of the platform. In early infancy, baby crawls over there without giving a shit. At some point though, they stop at the point where the wood meets the glass, or plexiglass maybe, showing that they recognize the difference in height and the fear of falling. Babies' brains are pretty fucking cool. Reconsolidation. When you retrieve memory from your long-term memory, it is susceptible to being manipulated. This can lead to memories being totally changed from the source. This is why eyewitness accounts cannot be fully seen as true. This knowledge is also being used to help people with PTSD by changing the negative memories they have of their particular trauma. The influence of the color red in sports. Judges were shown a video of a taekwondo match and awarded more points to the red competitor versus the blue competitor. When the colors were digitally reversed, judges awarded more points to the other, now red, competitor. Edit. Since there's a lot more interest than I expected, here's some more info. Red may be a signal of dominance, as reddened skin is associated with higher testosterone, or possibly higher fertility in women. Wearing red may induce intrinsic psychological effects which increase dominance in addition to altering the perception of others. Researchers found that putting red leg bands on birds increased dominant behavior, as they took the lion's share of the food. For my psychology degree dissertation, I presented photos of men to be rated on a scale of friendly, 0, to threatening, 10. Men received a higher threat score if I photoshopped their t-shirt to be red. Edit 2. Thank you for the gold award. There have been some experiments conducted, but the negativity effect/negativity bias is really sad to me. It basically says that negative things have a greater emotional and psychological toll on our health than positive/neutral things. So you got an A on a test, that's great. But you totally fail a test, and the world crumbles and it's a total disaster. 100 things can go right and work perfectly throughout the day, but it goes totally undetected in our minds. Then someone cuts us off in traffic, and we fume and rage. I learned about this theory almost 3 years ago, and think about it all the time. Reminds me to appreciate and notice the many little things in my day that do go right. Mice were put on two sides of a wall with a door in. Only the right mouse could open the door. Slowly, they filled the left mouse's room with water, and eventually when right mouse saw them in danger, they opened the door. However, mice that had previously been on the left side and were now on the right, mice who had previously been wetted opened the door considerably faster because they knew how unpleasant it was to be in the other scenario. Basically, mice have empathy. Link here. It's not that psychopaths lack empathy, but rather, they have the manual settings. A specific region of the brain lights up when people experience empathy. For most people it's an automatic, subconscious response. But in a study where they showed emotional videos to psychopaths and none, while scanning their brains, psychopaths would only light that region of the brain when specifically asked to feel for the character, while the control participants would light up automatically. The car crash experiment. It demonstrated that the way investigators word a question has an immediate effect on the subject's memory of an event. It was part of a suite of studies by Elizabeth Loftus, with various other co-researchers, that began to call in to question the veracity of eyewitness accounts. Left square bracket. Semicolon.